So I think from a producer's point of view, or anyone who's trying to put a new project together, it's really important to consider the 5 elements of the package carefully. And the package is nothing to do with marketing. It's all to do with the script. That's the first key element. The producer and their track record. And if you are an emerging producer, quite often people would like you to be able to maybe be working with more experienced talent. Maybe you should be thinking about other producers you might team up with or other production companies to work with, and possibly even think about getting an executive producer to be able to help put the finance plan and the distribution plan together with you. It's very important to think of the producer's role as the extensive project manager from beginning to end. And very few people are able to do both creative producing and financial producing in the same weight. So I think it's really good to be aware of your strengths and your weaknesses and try to address them. Then I think the third element of the package is, of course, the director. And the great thing about a first-time director is they haven't failed yet. And given that the film industry is all about hope and discovering new talent, that's definitely not a bad thing to put forwards if you also have the right kind of materials that they've made before, including shorts and they've done online. Make sure that you're prepared, because quite often a sales company or a distributor or a financier will say, where's the link for the director's work? So make sure that you're prepared with a very good showreel or certain work in advance. The fourth element of the package is the budget. And the trend overall in the international market has been to put enormous pressure on budgets in a downwards motion. So for example, the production finance market, which started in London in 2007, had an average budget of 11.5 million euros. It's now sitting at between 3 and 4 million euros. And this is an average of around 60 projects every time that are selected for the PFM. And the last element, which is very, very important in terms of market and positioning, especially from a distributor's point of view or a VOD platform, is of course the cast. And quite often, financiers will not read a script until 4 of the 5 elements at least are in place. So the other key point for an emerging producer and the talent that they're working with to understand is control of their material. They shouldn't be sending scripts out for opinion too early to financiers, sales companies and distributors. They should be carefully marshalling their material. And it's absolutely fine to go out with an advanced draft, but do not send a first draft or a second draft out. And certainly have an idea of your cast when you're going out to these kinds of executives, rather than having no idea at all. The production finance market was established by Film London back in 2007, so it'll be its 10th anniversary this year. And it was always predicated on the fact that London is a very important centre for international film finance, but also it's a centre for international sales companies. There are more than 45 international sales companies housed in London, and it's the second largest base for international sales companies outside LA. So our plan was, rather than focusing on co-production, was to focus on a very hard-end, commercially sort of driven market, where we would bring emerging and more established producers to a selection of around 60 financiers. And those 60 financiers probably mostly come from London, Berlin, Paris, and a certain number from the US. And they range from tax-driven finance, equity finance, through to sales companies, distributors, mini majors, some of the majors have attended regularly, etc. But in addition to that, obviously, curated level of financiers, we also have a call for producers to apply, and it goes out at Cannes in May every year. And what we're looking for are projects that have most elements of a package together, with an interesting concept. It doesn't have to be highly commercial. It could be very much a world cinema piece with a well-known director. So we're quite Catholic in terms of taste. But what is important is the producer is not just a first time, unless they were working with maybe an experienced executive producer. There needs to be some track record. And secondly, there really does need to be a director attached to each project. If there's no director attached, financiers will not read the project. They will not be able to calculate the value of what's on offer from the producer. They won't be able to work out what the sales estimates might be. They won't be able to work out what the distribution revenues might be. They can't do any kind of comparative work. So we're looking for projects that have 4 out of the 5 key elements in place. And we're also trying to make sure that a lot of European producers are able to attend. So there's a real mix of different types of projects. So in a sense, I'm just a glorified pimp who organizes a large number of speed dating meetings. And literally we hold, I think, 800 meetings in the 2 days. And we also have financier to financier meetings, a whole grid of about 300 of those. And this year, in 2016, we're going to blend the PFM where you have to have a project of above €1 million to apply, with the newly launched micro market, which has been running just for 3 years. We did some test pilots 3 years ago and 2 years ago, and we're now committed to running the micro market, which, unlike the PFM, which is normally 60 to 60 producers meeting financiers, is around 25 to 30 producers and directors meeting around 30 financiers. And we're opening that up to be half non-national European producers. So it's quite a big move in 2016. But we're looking for emerging producers from the whole of the UK, wherever they are, to apply if they have projects below €1 million for the micro market and above €1 million for the PFM. I think when it comes to looking for appropriate financiers, you need to do some research before you reach out to them. And one of the best resources for that is something called Sinando. It's a very good website, platform. It has a lot of details on financiers. And before you even come up with any strategy, it's very useful to just thrash through the whole of Sinando and do a short list of financiers who seem to be working at the same budget level as you, seem to be interested in the same kind of genre as you, and to think through how to target them. And once you've done that, it's actually very easy to get into places like Berlin, Cannes, and other festivals. You simply can sign up for market accreditation, which is rather different to the selective policy, if you like, of the PFM. But you have to go targeted. And the more research you do on the appropriate financiers, the better. It's also quite useful to call up other producers who've worked with those financiers, if you do your research carefully, and say what were they like to work with, how did they behave, was the money available at the right times, did they cash flow properly, so that instead of going in blind, you've got a really good fix on who you're meeting and understand the nature of their business. And the other really key thing, I think, is as a producer, quite often we're so passionate about our projects that we don't put ourselves in the position of the other side. So we don't realize that when they start talking about recoupment and waterfalls, they really do need to feel comfortable why and where they're putting their money. So you need to be very, very careful when you're putting a finance plan together. It's not to just do a wish list, but to think carefully about the position of each of those financiers in the waterfall and to run out your own recoupment chart before you actually sit in front of these kinds of financiers. That is a very useful skill, and quite a lot of people who are at the PFM still don't do that. The waterfall, in terms of film finance, is basically how anybody gets paid and when. So if you're a gap financier, you'd expect to be paid out as soon as sales and marketing costs have been recouped. If you're an equity financier, you would expect to be paid last before you actually get to cash break even. If you're a sales company, you'd expect a sales corridor, a fee is what it's called, of say maybe anything from 10 to 25%. And the higher it is, it may reflect the fact that the sales company has put up a minimum guarantee. But these kinds of terms are very important to understand. And they are all explained very carefully in the International Film Business book, which I mentioned earlier.